Proverbs is a study of Proverbs because of the nature of this particular book. As we get further into our chapter studies, we will outline the majority of the chapters, but so much of Proverbs requires a good overview from the outset. And so we've endeavored to look at ideas such as the authorship, considering the background of Solomon, his source of wisdom, and the fact that it took wisdom to ask for wisdom. We've looked at the canonicity just briefly. We've looked at the definition of what a proverb is. And yes, these are practical statements pertaining to life, but we have to keep in mind that they hinge on a fear of God, a respect for God, and understanding that true wisdom comes from God. All these things being said, let's take a look at the purpose of Proverbs. We'll start this tonight and hit on a couple of other ideas as we move forward over the next couple of weeks. But for now, when we look at the purpose of Proverbs, we can let Solomon give that. Proverbs 1:1, the Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction. Purpose number one of the Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, is to know. To know what? To know wisdom and to know instruction. So, I think we've got a window popped up there. Here we go. To know, chapter 1, verse 2. To know wisdom and instruction, to perceive. Now, the word translated perceive, another way to put it would be to understand. In fact, the word translated perceive is being, and different forms of this word throughout the book of Proverbs are translated as understanding and similar ideas. So Solomon wrote these Proverbs to know wisdom and instruction, to perceive, understand the words of understanding, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, judgment, and equity, to receive the instruction, not only to know instruction, but to know how to receive it, and that's learning. So the purpose of Proverbs is to know how to understand, to know how to learn, and then there's verse 4. To give subtlety to the simple, to the young man knowledge and discretion, to take what's learned and share it with those that need it. Proverbs is about knowing, understanding, learning, and teaching. Now, those ideas in mind, well, let's take those words and put them over to the side and delve a little bit further into the meaning. To know. The word translated know is yada, or another form of it is da'ath. Don't ask me the Hebrew conjugation or cognates and how they work. I don't have a clue. But anyway, that's the word, yada, or da'ath. And the meaning is to have information. It's the idea of having the facts, having the evidence. Knowledge. Let's go ahead and lay this out there as we get started. There's a big difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is very specific. It is the information. Whereas wisdom, the word translated wisdom, is chakma, and it carries the idea of skillfulness, properly applying knowledge and continuing to learn. Now, the difference between knowledge and wisdom, and while they can be used synonymously in some senses, the difference is, you ever know anyone that was really good at book learning? He memorized a chapter in a heartbeat. He could remember everything the teacher said, but he didn't know how to wipe his nose. Knowledge is retaining the information. Wisdom takes the information and puts it to use. Knowledge says, that's ice on the surface. Wisdom says, ice might break. Knowledge recognizes the facts as they are. Wisdom will take those facts and put them into practice. And then there is understanding. To know wisdom and instruction, to perceive, understand the words of understanding. The word translated understand or understanding is that word being. And it carries the idea of mentally dividing or mentally separating. It's the idea of utilizing logic, employing objectivity. This is, generally speaking, a foreign idea in the minds of Americans today. We know nothing about objectivity. We know nothing about looking at things from more perspective than from any other perspective than just our own. What tends to be the most common means of communication or the way that most people know what's taking place in other people's lives nowadays? Anti-social media, right? So you hop on social media and you see people posting ideas. Are they posting ideas in a way that takes into consideration the position and perspective of the people that they're trying to reach? Or are they just spouting whatever comes to their mind? Are we just spouting whatever comes to mind? The book of Proverbs emphasizes the idea of mentally separating. This is the concept of looking at a situation from a perspective other than just my own. By the way, this is key to leadership. The person who endeavors to lead without having an understanding of those that he is leading is simply going to be a hardhead. Or as Proverbs 28:16 puts it, the prince or leader that lacks understanding is also a great oppressor. The one who endeavors to lead without understanding the people that he's leading is just going to be a heavy thumb on them. Or we go to Proverbs 18:2. The fool hath no delight in understanding, but that his heart may discover itself. Fools have no interest in hearing your perspective and hearing where other people stand or how other people see situations. Fools have no interest in listening so as to get even a glimpse of how other minds work. The fool just wants to make sure that he says what he has to say. Social media. How many Christians approach evangelism foolishly? How often do we just go out and we know we're spouting the truth, but we're not spouting it in a way that's going to listen to the people that we are endeavoring to teach? How did Jesus interact with the woman at the well? Did he just sit down and tell her before anything else, I'm the Christ? Or did he engage her? Listen to her. Interact with her. Yes, he already knew who she was, what she was, but he gave her an opportunity to divulge much about herself. When we're endeavoring to teach others, do we employ the listening that will enable understanding? We'll get nothing out of Proverbs. Nothing out of Proverbs if we do not learn the value of objectivity. Being swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath, as James would put it. So, the purpose of Proverbs, to know wisdom, to perceive the words of understanding. By the way, while Solomon possessed and inspired wisdom, that wisdom did not always give him every detail of every situation. Yet, what was perhaps what was the single event that caused the people of the land to realize just how wise their king was? There was a case that came before Solomon's court. Two women, harlots, One of them had suffocated her child in the night. And the dispute was, whose child is this other one? Because they had both had infants in recent weeks. How did Solomon approach that situation? What was his solution? Bring me a sword. Bring you a sword? Are you going to play spin the sword and just choose who gets it? Well, bring me a sword. What was he going to do with the sword? Solomon, what's wrong with you? What kind of a grotesque, brutal, horrific despot are you? You're going to do this to an infant? He employed understanding. He wasn't a mama, but he could understand how a mama would think. He wasn't a harlot who was trying to take someone else's child, but he knew enough to step back and think about, well, if one of these is the real mother, and if one of these is an imposter, then one is going to care about the life of the child, and the other's not going to care about much of anything. Understanding. So, to know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding, to give subtlety to the simple. Verse 4 speaks of the word subtlety. Now, it's translated from the Hebrew word orma, which another form of that is aruma, and both of those are based off of the Hebrew word aram, which means to make bare, to expose. Ultimately, this word aram, when used in wisdom literature, carries the idea of applying wisdom, taking the wisdom in order to avoid an undesired outcome. Proverbs 21:3, the prudent man foreseeth evil and hideth himself. The prudent man sees trouble and says, well, I don't want any of that. And he takes a different route. He hides himself. He makes preparations. But the simple, which by the way, the simple are the exact opposite of the prudent. Proverbs 1:4, to give subtlety to the simple, or to give prudence to the simple. The simple aren't the ones that see trouble and say, well, we don't want any of that. They're the ones that see trouble and say, hey, y'all, watch this. The simple are the ones that think they're invincible, impervious, or they're so oblivious that they don't even recognize trouble when it's right in front of them. Prudence is using wisdom to avoid the undesired outcomes. And then there is the idea of discretion. To give subtlety to the simple, to the young man, knowledge and discretion. The word translated discretion is mizimah. And it's the idea of applying wisdom not to avoid the undesirable, but to bring about a desired result. So, these ideas being incorporated. When Solomon says knowledge, typically speaking, we're talking about facts. The information, the body of evidence, if you will. When he says wisdom, simply put, wisdom is taking knowledge and putting it to use. Instead of letting knowledge sit on the shelf and collect dust, it's putting knowledge into use. Understanding, the only way I'll ever see anything from anyone else's point of view is to listen. That means that understanding is going to put self to the side, is going to be considerate of others, concerned about others, conscientious of others, and caring of others. Prudence, letting that wisdom lead to something even better, avoiding what you don't want. And discretion, letting wisdom lead to something better, arriving at outcomes that are desired. Moving forward, we've seen some key ideas that pertain to wisdom. let's look at some key ideas that pertain to foolishness. The word fool, in the book of Proverbs, fool, foolishness, and its various forms are translated from 3 different Hebrew words. Typically speaking, you hear the word fool and what comes to mind? A court jester? Joker? You hear fool, what comes to mind? Class clown? Okay. Someone that's slow. Okay. What are some other ways we use the word fool? Come on, I know you pity them. What, only 2 people? You have never heard anyone say, I pitied a fool. There you go. How do we use the word fool? Idiot. Okay. Someone either lacking knowledge or lacking the ability to use knowledge. The Greeks had a word, idiotes. What word do we get from that? What did I say? Why'd you have to call me that? Okay, so we think of the word fool and we use it in a broad array of applications. When you read the word fool in the book of Proverbs, you've got to be careful with it, because it's not always the same word translated fool. One is the word evil. It looks like a lot like the word evil. And that's helpful because it kind of sort of is. The Hebrew word evil is the idea of that which is false, that which is faulty, that which is fraudulent. It's a lack of integrity. Deceptive evil. And then there's kasil. The word kasil it indicates foolish the way we would so often use the word. A lacking of intelligence. It actually connects to the idea of dull or dim. We might say someone's dim-witted or dull of mind. That's the kasil. Evil, this lacking in integrity. Kasil, lacking intelligence. And then there's Nabal. If you studied your Old Testament thoroughly, then there's a good chance this word sounds familiar because it's going to sound a lot like a name. Anyone remember someone named Nabal? Who was Nabal? He was Abigail's first husband. What kind of man was Nabal? A churlish man? Nabal was the one that was wealthy. He had his flocks, and his flocks had been going into the hills and mountains where David's men were, and David's men had been helping protect Nabal's flocks and his shepherds. And when the day came for shearing, David sent to let Nabal know, hey, here's the help that we've been giving. Do you have any aid that you might send our way? Because shearing day was a celebration. It was a big deal. It was a day of celebrating the profit from this flock. And at this point, Nabal likely had plenty at his disposal, especially based on what Abigail later brought to David's aid. But Nabal had plenty at his disposal that he could have shared simply as a gesture of gratitude. But when he heard from David, hey, do you have anything that could help us? We've tried to help you. His response was, who's David? There's a lot of guys running from their masters nowadays. Needless to say, that didn't sit well with David. He vowed that he would slay every male in Naboth's house, but he didn't say it quite that delicately. David was wroth. As he traveled, Abigail, the wife of Nabal, is told about the behavior of her husband. And the servants are saying, he's such a fool. They actually say, David helped us. So Abigail takes what she can. She goes and she meets David. She stops David from doing something he's going to regret. In the morning, Nabal awakens from his drunken stupor, learns what his wife did in order to prevent him from falling at the hands of David. And we don't know if it was a heart attack or a stroke, but he dies. Whatever the case, he dies. Perhaps it was just a shock. Here's one that was a failure. Here's one that couldn't bear under, that couldn't bear others. Here's one that couldn't complete. Here's one that lacked endurance. The name Nabal means fool. And the word Nabal truly is. So when you read the word fool in your King James Version of Proverbs, don't just automatically think that it's that Kasil that lacks intelligence and he's a bit dim-witted. He's a little slow in his mental processes. When you read the word fool in the book of Proverbs, it's going to help to do just a little bit of word study. Check and see what the word was that was translated. Is this the evil fool? Is this the dim fool? Or is this the one that can endure? So, the purpose of Proverbs is to take the Nabals, the Kasils, and the Avils and to help them learn some yada knowledge so that it will become shakma, wisdom, and they can apply it in a way. It's going to require some bean understanding, and they'll be able to apply it in a way that they will exhibit the prudence, aram, and the discretion, the mizmah. Now, let's move forward to something else. The purpose of Proverbs: know, understand, learn, teach. Multiple times in the book of Proverbs, wisdom is personified. Consider, if you will, Proverbs 2, beginning in verse 2. Incline your ear to wisdom, apply your heart to understanding. Cry after knowledge, lift up your voice for understanding. If thou seekest her as for hid treasures, and searchest for her as for silver. The idea here, wisdom is linked with knowledge and understanding, and the instructor here says, seek her. Or you take a look at Proverbs 3, beginning in verse 13. Happy is the man that findeth wisdom, and the man that getteth understanding, for the merchandise of it is better than the merchandise of silver, the gain thereof than fine gold. She is more precious than rubies, and all the things that can't be desired are not to be compared unto her. So, wisdom personified as a she. Matter of fact, personified as a she whose beauty they ought to desire, whose attributes they ought to seek. Proverbs 7:4. Call wisdom thy sister. Say understanding, thou art my kinswoman. Here again, wisdom is described as being a close relative and of the feminine gender. Wisdom is personified as a woman. Okay? Frequently, in biblical history and throughout human history, ideas and concepts have been personified. There is a statue in New York Harbor. What's it called? Statue of Liberty, or another term that's often used is Lady Liberty. Is that a specific person from history? Or is it a concept? Personified as a person in statue form. By the way, when you read the book of Revelation and you see that woman that's taken into the wilderness, similar sort of ideas, concepts being personified as an individual. When you read Proverbs, wisdom is being personified as a woman. Now, that thought being conveyed, notice what this woman does. 3 times in the book of Proverbs, wisdom is not only personified as a woman, but she is given words. Proverbs 1, beginning in verse 20. The wisdom crieth without, she uttereth her voice in the streets. She not only cries, but she cries where? In the streets. What's the indication of that location? Public area. She is out in the open for all to hear as she sends forth her petition. Wisdom cries without, she utters her voice in the streets. She cries in the chief place of concourse. We'd call that a high traffic area. In the chief place of concourse, in the opening of the gates, in the city she uttereth her words. And what does she say? Verse 22, how long, ye simple ones, will ye love simplicity, and scorners delight in their scorning, and fools hate knowledge? The first words that wisdom asks are, how long? When you were younger, maybe those teenage years, maybe before, was there ever any instruction you needed to receive more than once? More than twice? Did you ever have a parent or a teacher or a ball coach or maybe even a friend ask how long before you're going to learn? That's what wisdom is saying. And frequently it's the case that those who are endeavoring to bestow wisdom and bequeath wisdom to others have to ask the same question. How long? How long, you simple ones, are you going to love your simplicity? How long are you fools going to hate knowledge? Turn you at my reproof. Behold, I'll pour out my spirit unto you. I'll make known my words unto you. Just turn and listen. The word translated turn in verse 23 is shub. It's elsewhere translated repent in the Old Testament. Turn you at my reproof. I'm going to pour out my spirit unto you. I'll make known my words unto you. Wisdom is saying just turn and listen. But as has often been the case in so many lives, here wisdom describes it, verse 24, I've called and you refused. I stretched out my hand and no man regarded. You've set it not my counsel. You've despised all my reproof. I've been calling, but you haven't been listening. Wisdom cries, who will hear? Or we go to Proverbs 8 rather, picking up at verse 1. Proverbs 8, the entire chapter is wisdom speaking. And as wisdom speaks, the initial question by the speaker of Proverbs says, does not wisdom cry and understanding put forth her voice? Wisdom speaking again, can you hear her? Where is she speaking, Mr. Solomon, sir? Well, verse 2, she's standing in the top of high places, in the way, in the places of the paths. She's standing in the public places, just like was described in chapter 1. In the way of the places of the past, not only public places, but high traffic places. Wisdom is calling for everyone that has eyes and ears. Wisdom is calling for whosoever will to listen. What's the cry? Verse 3. Verse 4 rather. Unto you, O men, I call, my voices to the sons of men. Who's invited? Everybody. My voice is to the sons of men. Ye simple, understand wisdom. Ye fools, be ye of an understanding heart. Point to draw right here. Is wisdom foolish? Is wisdom dishonest? Is wisdom naive? Simple, you can know wisdom. Fools, you can be of an understanding heart. Back in chapter 1, she said, turn you at my reproof. I'll make known my voice to you. Just turn and listen. Here she says, hey, you simple ones, you can understand. You can understand wisdom. You fools, you can be of an understanding heart. Hear, for I'm going to speak of excellent things. The opening of my lips shall be right things. If you'll just listen, then the simple will no longer be simple. The fools will no longer be fools. So, we let wisdom speak. And if wisdom is going to speak, she is going to speak in public places and high traffic places, and she is going to speak to everyone. She is going to offer to everyone and invite everyone to something that is going to improve everyone, strengthen everyone, inform everyone. Proverbs 9. She's built her house. She's hewn out her 7 pillars. Wisdom works. Wisdom prepares. Wisdom gets ready. Wisdom has something to offer. She's killed her beasts. She's mingled her wine. She's furnished her table. Wisdom is hosting a banquet. If wisdom sent you an invitation and said, come eat at my table, how would you respond? Sorry, too busy? Let's rephrase that. Wisdom has sent you an invitation inviting you to her table. How have you responded? Sorry, too busy. Sorry, I already know what I need to know. Pause button. Go back to Proverbs 1. Proverbs 1:5. A wise man will hear and will increase learning. A man of understanding shall attain unto wise counsels. The wise are willing to learn. Proverbs 1:7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Isn't that interesting? Proverbs 1:5. The wise man's willing to learn. Proverbs 1:7. The fool is not. Wisdom has sent invitations to a banquet. Do we already know all that we need to know? Or are we willing to learn? Back to Proverbs 9. She sent forth her maiden. She cries upon the highest places of the city. Here she is, once again, sending out the invitations for her banquet, for her feast. In the highest places of the city, the most prominent, the most visible, the most recognizable stations, whoso is simple. Here she is again. Every time she beckons the simple. The simple. Whoso is simple, let him turn in hither. As for him that wanted understanding, she says to him, come eat of my bread, drink the wine that I've mingled. Come to my feast. Forsake the foolishness. By the way, the word translated foolish in verse 6, King James Version, Proverbs 9:6. The word translated foolish is the same word translated simple back up in verse 4. Forsake being simple and live. Go in the way of understanding. He that reproveth the scorner getteth himself shame. He that rebukes a wicked man gets himself a blot. Here's wisdom summoning the simple to come to her supper. And she even says at this point, think about this. Whoever rebukes a scorner gets to himself shame. Whoever rebukes a wicked man gets to himself a blot. Who needs to hear that? Who is at risk of rebuking a scorner and reproving the wicked? Her call is not just for the scorner and the wicked. Her call is for every one of us that think that we can recognize the scorner and the wicked, but we don't really know how to approach them or deal with them. Because the lesson that she teaches in her very invitation is one that goes out to the ones that would endeavor to change the scorner and the wicked, who, by the way, can be changed, but not if they are approached with foolishness. So, give instruction to a wise man, who will be yet wiser. Verse 9, teach a just man, he will increase in learning. The wise will continue to listen. Flip side of the coin. This is wisdom sending out the invitation to her feast. Move down in this chapter. Begin in verse 13. A foolish woman is clamorous. She is simple and knoweth nothing. She sits at the door of her house. on a seat in the high places of the city, to call passengers who go right on their ways. Here this foolish woman is. She's not killed her beast or mingled her wine. She's not furnished her table. She's not built her house or hewn out her 7 pillars. She's not made anything ready except for lounging on her porch and now going out into the street. And what does she say? Verse 16, whoso is simple, let him turn in hither. As for him that wanteth understanding, she saith to him. Boy, verse 16 looks a lot like verse 4, doesn't it? Their invitation begins the same way. What does the foolish one say? Stolen waters are sweet, bread eaten in secret is pleasant, but he knoweth not. Her invitee, her guest, doesn't know that the dead are there and her guests are in the depths of hell. Here's a point. Wisdom has furnished a banquet and sent invitations. So has foolishness. Which feast is better attended? When we move our way through the book of Proverbs, our goal is knowledge. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Our goal is wisdom. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Our goal is understanding, prudence, discretion. To avoid being the Evil, lack of integrity, the Kasil, lack of intelligence, and the Nabal, lack of endurance. We want to be the ones that hear wisdom's call, that recognize her voice, and that have no interest in the banquet of foolishness in whatever form it takes. Thank you for your time tonight. We'll pick up here next week.